I mean, I thought, oh, she's got to
I
have,
usually
because
throw
she was
everything
down
away
Tucson.
unless
I was
we
suffering here with the flu.
table
Came back like a
something.
week or two, a week
And
ago.
then I keep it, because the
I was on
table
the tail end
is,
of it.
I've been doing it 6 years, and all the Board of Aldermen, I was on the
Nobody
Conservation
has it
Commission
down in
for 6
Tucson.
years.
It's
Papers
6:30.
all day. And really, everything's available online, so.
As a state rep, same thing, and that community's too much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jack Courier. I serve you as the chairman of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. This is the Zoning Board of Adjustment. If you're here for the aldermanic meeting, that's downstairs. So before we get going tonight, I'd like to go over a few rules, but first there have been 2 changes to the agenda tonight. The first is the applicant for land on Curtis Drive has requested that that case be, they had a family emergency and they could not present tonight, so they have asked to table that to the next meeting, which is February 27th. Is there anyone here with an interest in the land on Curtis Drive? Okay, so again, they had called and said they had a family emergency, and they have, and so we're granting them that table because they're to the, and that's 2 weeks from tonight at 6:30. There's an agenda for tonight and for 2 weeks from tonight. On that table there, you'll see that it's the first one on the agenda for next Tuesday. The other change tonight was there was a request by the applicant on 393 Main Street, that's on the corner of Main Street and East Dunstable Road, to table that into the February 27th meeting also. I'm not sure what the situation was. Is there anybody here for 393 Main Street on the corner of Main and East Dunstable? Nobody here for that. Well, that's also, that'll be the second case on February 27th. So moving on, first of all, if anybody has a cell phone, I ask that you could put it on the silent mode or turn it off. Tonight's meeting, it's a public meeting, and it's actually being recorded in 3 venues. It's being recorded first video, and I'd like to thank in advance Tim. You don't see him, but he's behind the in the other room, and he's actually capturing the action, and you can watch it in a few days on Nashua Public TV. Also, it's recorded audio, so in a few days, the audio will be up on the NashuaNewHampshire.gov website. So you can, if you wanted to listen to it, you could stream it at your leisure. It'll be up in a few days. And there's actually a third venue that we recorded, and that's written transcripts. The written transcript is actually the official court document should something rise into the court beyond just this auditorium and our decision. So for that reason, I ask if you would indulge me that we just have one person speaking at a time, and who's ever speaking is speaking into the microphone. These microphones pick us up, and also our transcriber knows our voices, but I'll be asking each person to say their name and address before they speak, because the written record needs to have a name and address. Otherwise, if something goes to court, the testimony never happened if there's not a correctly spelled name at that attached to it. So a few things before we get going. There's 2 components to each case we hear tonight. And again, for anybody who walked in, the land at Curtis Drive and also 393 Main Street is postponed. So there's 2 components to each of the 3 cases we hear tonight. The first component is a public hearing. That's where we, the board, hear from you, the public, and there's a fairly specific order of presentation. And actually, before I do that, I'd like to introduce the other members. To my right is Ms. Mary Ellen McKay. She serves as our vice chair. Going around, we have Estathia Boris, who's an alternate member, and also Ms. Kathy Vitale, who's also an alternate member. And to my left is Mr. Carter Falk, and he's the deputy planning manager in the city of Nashua. So the 4 of us who are here tonight, we volunteer our time. We live in the city of Nashua. We are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the Board of Aldermen. And I'd say if there's anybody who's interested in serving on municipal government, please feel free to give the mayor's office a call and let them know if you're interested. We are lay people, we are not lawyers. We do receive yearly training on zoning issues. Zoning is very much a moving target, and the courts are always adjusting the definitions of what comprises a variance and a special exception. So those are the two things we're hearing tonight. We're hearing for variances and special exceptions, and I'll take a moment to describe those. Variances are requests to deviate from zoning, and all of us who live in Nashua, whether we know it or not, like it or not, we live under this big book of zoning rules, and there's different zoning districts. And by state law, each town and city has a zoning board of adjustment. So there's many property owners who also often want to have a deviation from the zoning requirements. That's a variance. And by state law, these boards, zoning boards of adjustment, are created in our state. And there's 5 criteria. My copy here is pretty small, but I'd like to tick through that 5 criteria. 1, the variance will not be contrary to the public interest. Number 2 of 5 is that the spirit of the ordinance is observed. Number 3 is that substantial justice is served. Number 4 is that the values of surrounding properties are not diminished. And number 5 is that literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship to the landowner. So that's the 5 criteria for a variance. We're also hearing a special exception tonight. A special exception is slightly different. The bar is a little bit lower. And there's 5 criteria for a special exception. Number 1 is that the use must be listed in the table of uses. And just to describe that, this book of zoning has a list of approved by the alderman special exceptions. And like tonight, for example, we're hearing a request for an in-law apartment, and that is one of the pre-approved or already approved special exceptions. So a special exception is a use that's already approved here, but it must meet the following criteria. 1 is that the requested use or activity will not create undue traffic congestion or unduly impair pedestrian safety. The next is that the requested use or activity will not overload any public water, drainage, or sewer system. Number 4 is that any special exception regulations set forth in other sections of the zoning ordinance are fulfilled. And number 5 is that the requested use or activity will not impair the integrity or be out of character with the district or immediate neighborhood. So that's the 5 criteria that by state law, 3 or more members of this board need to find merit in order to grant a special exception. Now, getting back to the meeting, I mentioned about the 2 components, the public hearing and the public meeting. Each case will start off, it will be the public hearing, and that's where we'll first hear from the applicant. The applicant will have up to 15 minutes to present their case. We actually have a timer here. It'll count down. It'll be green for the first 14 minutes, yellow from minute 14 to 15, and then turn red if you're still testifying. I'll be asking you to truncate your presentation at that point. But hopefully everybody can squeeze it in 15 minutes. All of us on the board have received written copies of the applications. Oftentimes we site walk it to get a close look. For me, it's very important to see each thing I'm being asked to judge by. So anyway, after the applicant has spoken, likely that we'll probably have questions for the applicant. And then anybody else who wants to speak in favor of the application will have up to 5 minutes to present their testimony in favor of the application. And then after the applicant and all favorable testimony is heard, anybody with questions, concerns, or opposition will have up to 5 minutes to present their testimony. If there is opposition, sometimes there isn't, sometimes there is. If there is opposition, then the applicant will have 5 minutes back at the microphone to address the opposition or the questions. And if at that point one and only one person who has spoken in opposition will have the final 5 minutes to present their case. So that will wrap up the public hearing portion, and then we'll start the public meeting. And the public meeting is where the 4 of us deliberate here and likely come to a decision, not always. It could be positive, negative, or sometimes a table, for example, if we think we need more information. So that is how each case will be heard tonight. A few other things. Whatever decision we render tonight, there's a 30-day window of appeal. So if there's an aggrieved party, the next step for that party of standing would be to request a rehearing. And if there was any interest in somebody doing that, you could call Mr. Falk. There's a 30-day window which you have to provide a rehearing request. And that's really important because any decision we make, whether it's a positive or negative, there's this 30-day window of appeal. So say if we approve something, we get a request to rehear it, and we find merit in that rehearing request and decide to rehear it, then the decision is stayed and we hear the case again. If we do decide not to hear the rehearing request, or if there's a party still aggrieved at that point, the next step would be to go to Hillsborough County Superior Court to present your case. So before we get going tonight, are there any questions from anyone in the audience? Again, there's copies of the agenda on that table, and 393 Main Street and the land at Curtis Drive is postponed and tabled until next meeting on February 27th. Are we good to go here? All right, why don't we get going? And I'd like to open the public the public hearing on case number 1. And that would be, the address is 9 Chaucer Road, and let me read in the record what the request is. Number 1 is a special exception to allow an accessory in-law dwelling unit. That's, so we're hearing a special exception for 9 Chaucer Road, and also a variance, 2 variances. The first is to allow a new second 10-foot wide curb cut on Browning. I think it might be Swift. Yeah, it's advertised here as Browning, but it's actually Swift. And also, the second variance is to allow a new entrance to an accessory dwelling unit on the front or frontage side of the single-family dwellings. Who is here to present this case? Yes.
We noticed that typo that it said Browning instead of Swift, and we sent out a notice to all the abutters, so they should have had it before the appropriate time, so.
Okay.
Anyway, but it's clearly just a typo. Obviously, Browning Avenue
Is
half
not
a mile away. So.
touching into Swift, so.
Cut and paste error.
All right, is anybody here to present the case? Hi, if you'd like to come to the podium and give us your name and address, and if you care to walk us through your application.
I'm Carrie Daw from 9 Chaucer Road.
Hi, good evening.
And Chris Daw from 9 Chaucer Road.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're seeking to add a in-law apartment as a special exemption, and also have a driveway and a door on that side on the Swift. Chaucer, our house is on the corner of Chaucer and Swift, and we're looking to have my mother-in-law move in. She lives in Nashua also, and she's looking to downsize. And we're very conscious of making sure that it's going to fit in the neighborhood. This is a family home. My parents bought the house when it was built in 1976, and we bought it from them in 2000. So we're going to make sure the design fits in with the aesthetic of the neighborhood. There are already several driveways on Swift Road, and this will just be for her car only. So I don't think it'll impact any traffic or the public that way. And we're...
There's already a door
Oh,
on
there's already a
Swift
door.
as well on the side of our house.
Our side entrance door is on a stoop, so the
So
front...
it would be essentially the exact same, just bumped out a little farther.
Okay.
Do you have the sketches of our,
We do. We have several sketches. Looks like a local architect in Milford
yeah.
has drawn it. So let's just see, are there any questions for the applicant, for starters? I'm sure you have a question?
Just to clarify a couple of items that I see. I'm seeing, according to the drawing, that your curb cut for this proposed driveway is about 50 feet, which is required from the corner. And
Correct, from the corner of Chaucer down Swift, yes.
Right. That was your the main thing that I believe that I saw, that I just wanted to make sure. And that would be it.
Okay, there's
Setbacks are met.
what's that?
All the setbacks are met.
Okay, thank you. There's some criteria for accessory dwelling units. There's actually 9 of them. Are you familiar with those?
I think we are,
A
yeah.
little bit, yes.
Maybe I'd just like to tick through those just to make sure we have them covered. Number 1 is that the accessory dwelling unit shall be incidental and subordinate in extent, use, and purpose to the primary structure and does not exceed 750 square feet.
Correct.
We're within that.
I think yours is designed at right at 750 square.
700, right.
Does that include like the, I would call it like the, it's not really a deck, it's like maybe a 3-season porch on the back?
It doesn't, because that's not going to be heated.
Mm-hmm, okay,
So we wouldn't include that anyway.
sure,
It's common space to the whole house.
okay,
So they're good with that.
okay. And the accessory dwelling, this is number 2, the accessory dwelling unit shall be the only accessory dwelling unit within the same lot as a single-family dwelling.
Correct.
Yes. Number 3 is the accessory dwelling unit shall not alter the single-family character or appearance of the dwelling.
Yes.
Your testimony is you don't think it does, it matches in with it?
I think it matches in, yes. That's what I think the architect's drawing was.
So one of the criteria, and this is why you're asking for a variance, is that, under that number 3, is that no new entrance or exit shall be constructed at the front or frontage side of the family dwelling, but what you're asking for is that door on the other side, and thus the variance for that.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. And then number 4 is the owner of the property must occupy either the primary or accessory dwelling unit as the owner's principal place of residence for a period of at least 5 years following.
Correct.
And your testimony is you'll be adhering to that.
Yes.
Sounds like you have no plans of going anywhere.
No, we got a lot of kids.
Been there his whole life.
All right, and then number 5, the owner of the property shall provide the city of Nashua with a covenant for filing with the Hillsborough County Registry of Deeds. And I'm not gonna read that whole covenant. Have you heard that before? There's like some language there that says essentially it's accessory dwelling unit.
Yes.
If you're not familiar with that specific language, you could just ask Mr. Falk, but that is something that you need to follow through on before the certificate of occupancy would be issued.
Okay.
Number 6 is that 1 additional off-street parking space is required above the minimum standard, and your proposal is, I think, with that on the side, the proposed new driveway.
Yes.
Number 7 is that an interior door shall be provided between the primary dwelling unit and the accessory dwelling unit.
It will.
Number 8 is that the single-family dwelling shall not be separated in ownership.
It won't.
And the last one is the accessory dwelling unit shall only be associated with single-family detached dwellings and shall not be associated with manufactured housing, which does not apply in this case.
It's not.
Okay, were there any other questions for the applicant? I guess I had a couple questions, and that is, I was just curious, when I look at the picture from the proposed front,
Yes.
it almost, to me, it's like the proposed addition, I would almost call that like a hip roof, like it.
Can copies of the sketches be circulated?
Sure, the question was, can copies of the sketches be circulated? Do you have an extra one?
We do. We
I do.
brought extra.
Actually, yeah, if you would, that's a fine question. Was there anybody else who wants to see a copy of it? Okay. At the front elevation on the proposed addition, it almost, is that like a hip roof, like it kind of angles off to each side? Okay, I just wasn't sure if that was the roof or just a dimension line, but it looks like that's the roof. All right.
It'll be the roof.
So it's like a hip roof design. And then the other question I had is on the foundation plan, where it shows the proposed new foundation. I was just, there's like a bump out here, and I wasn't sure what that is. Is that the existing side door?
It's probably our fireplace.
Oh, okay. All right,
our
that would
chimney.
make sense.
We have a chimney there, yeah.
Okay.
And then the door's behind that a little bit,
Behind it is away from
away
Trosa.
from the front of the house.
Yeah, okay. All right. And That was the only questions I had. Are we all set on that?
Yep.
I think we're all set with your testimony. We'll see what we have. You can have a seat. Did anybody else need to see a copy of the of the plan? Okay, was there anybody else here to speak in favor of the proposed accessory dwelling unit? Hi, if you'd like to come to the microphone and give us your name and address and let us know what's on your mind.
My name's Jessica Forcier. I'm at 3 Chaucer Road, so on the same street as them. I actually got the chance to see the print already, and it looks just like one of the houses that are already in the neighborhood. It just looks like a tiny addition, a tiny bump out. So to me, as a neighbor, I would be happy with it. And I happen to know them as neighbors and who will be living there, and I would be glad to see the addition to the neighborhood. So that's all. Just
Great, and I'm sorry, what did you say your address was?
a 3 Chaucer.
3, okay.
I'm
so-
2 houses up.
2 houses up?
Yep.
All right. Any questions for Ms. Forcier? Oh, we're all set. Thanks for coming tonight. Was there anybody else to speak in favor of the proposed addition? Was there anybody with questions, concerns, or opposition? Sir, if you'd like to come to the microphone and give us your name and address and let us know what's on your mind.
Hello.
Good evening.
For volunteering your time on this. Hi, my name is Tim Dolan. I'm at number 8 Chaucer Road.
Is that on the right or across the street?
Across the street from
Across
the
the street,
Dawes.
okay. So you kind of back up to the
To the
Tamposi
Flatley
property.
building,
Flatley.
Terra
Flatley,
Heights
yeah.
now.
Okay.
The Daw family has been wonderful there. I've only been there for 30 years, and the father was great, and they're great, and such like that. My comment is not specifically on the Daws, but this is the only opportunity that I could figure out how to make my testimony be clear or bring it out. I'm very concerned about ADUs in single-family residence without some constraints. It's basically turning it into a multifamily neighborhood. The state has said ADUs will be allowed in single-family residence. That battle and war has been done, it's finished. But with there's a lot of things that can be talked about, but with the arbitrary restriction that the property must be, one of the units must be owner-occupied for 5 years, I think that's arbitrary. I would request that one of the living units be owner-occupied forever. Why should when the Daws, I have no issue with what they're planning to do right now, but when they sell, why should somebody 10 years from now have more rights than he has right now? I could buy, in 10 years from now, I could buy it and never live in it, and I could sell it and do anything, rent it, what have you. So I really think it needs to be owner-occupied. That will at least help. And in fact, I've done some research, not as much as you guys, for sure, but New Hampshire Association of Municipal Association said an owner occupancy requirement is definitely recommended if you wish to avoid turning a property into a duplex with an absentee landlord. Now, their usage of the word duplex, I don't think is, it could be, a rental unit. Okay. And then the last point is, and I don't see, it's related, is that I feel that the smaller unit, the Nashua said, 750? No more than 750, which is good. But the smaller unit, if it's rented, it cannot be rented. Oh, was that my time? 58?
No,
Yep.
you're still good. You're
Okay.
still good. You got 5 minutes.
The smaller unit cannot be rented for less than 30 days. Because when I see a separate living unit, that smacks of an Airbnb opportunity. Now, Actually, the DAWs today can do the arithmetic to say, do we want to rent that out to somebody? And the going rate in Nashua might be $800, no utilities, yeah, with the exception of water and sewer. So they can get $800 month to month or on an annual basis. Or they could rent it out, Airbnb, for roughly about, I would say, $100 a day. Local rentals for Holiday Inn and Crown Plaza, or 120, 130, and plus tax. And actually, the arithmetic I did, even at 50% occupancy on an Airbnb, they're making pretty good money. So, the last point is not against the DAWs. I don't think it's. We need to put more restrictions on ADUs and single-family residence. ADUs, I believe, from the state was intended for aging in place, the traditional in-law apartment, which it sounds like that's what they wish to do, but also key is affordable workforce housing. And without that restriction of 30-day minimum rental, is basically taking affordable living out of the marketplace. Ironically enough, San Francisco, where
You kind of try to wrap it up.
where Airbnb started, San Francisco is implementing some really tough laws against Airbnb for the fact that they're taking housing units out of the market.
Okay, I'd just like
Thank you.
to, I'd like to address some of the concerns. So recently, as in the last year to 2 years-ish, the state of New Hampshire has really changed the definition of accessory dwelling unit.
I've read that.
In days of old, up to a short while ago, it was really a blood relative. That was the wording of it. I would summarize it by saying the thought process, I say personally, I didn't like it, I don't like it. The thought process was, for many aging people who live in these big country homes, the spouse has died, the children have gone, they can no longer afford their big homestead.
House rich.
This is whatever you want to call it, the Illuminati at the State House. This was their solution, was to allow an in-law. It's not really an in-law anymore. It's basically more than one person staying in a home. Personally, I don't think it applies much or at all to Nashua, but that's the law that's been laid down onto the city. However, the city's wording is much, much tighter, and I'll just reiterate a few things I had mentioned earlier. Like, the owner of the property must occupy one of the two dwellings for at least a period of 5 years. Quite frankly, that eliminates the idea of, say, a new owner comes in, it's not a duplex. If a new owner buys their property, they have the right to have an accessory dwelling unit, but that new owner must live there. So there will never be an absentee landlord for at least 5 years. So I appreciate, I was our alderwoman, Mary Ann Maliza, and Brian McCarthy in particular, who had helped craft that language. So what the city of Nashua has is much, much tighter than what the state has, for the very reasons that you're expressing.
The state is quiet as to, makes no statement on the length of owner occupancy.
Right, and the city of Nashua does. So I personally, I think that's a good thing, and that's 5 years that the owner, minimum of 5 years, the owner must occupy. But I just wanted to provide that. I didn't know if anybody had any questions for Mr. Dolan? I think we're all set. Thank you for coming. And was there anybody else with questions or concerns? Oh, we have an alderwoman who's right here. How about that?
I'm sorry.
I didn't see you there.
I snuck in. Alderwoman Melizzi Golia, Marion Melizzi Golia, the alderwoman from Ward 8. I'm here just to reflect some of the comments I've received, and I think they are consistent with what you heard the last time there was consideration of an accessory dwelling in Ward 8. I don't think people are against them, and I think people recognize that actually in the situations we've had, they have been in-law situations. So the concerns people have raised is around the variances and what they do to looks of homes. And we had that discussion a couple of months ago, excuse me, when another accessory dwelling was brought forward. So the second curb cut, the door on the frontage side, again, those are the concerns you heard the last time an accessory dwelling was brought forward, and those are the concerns I've been asked to just share with you once again. But certainly, the use, no one has a concern with that, and what's happening with that.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions for Lizzie? I think we're all set. Was there anybody else with questions, concerns, or opposition about 9 Chaucer Road? Sir, if you'd like to come back, I know I have a couple questions, but I didn't know if you wanted to address any of the testimony you've heard tonight, or if you're good with your case as it is. Feel free to raise that microphone up a little. Thanks.
I don't have any additional comments other than what we stated.
Yep.
Looking forward to having our mother-in-law move in.
Okay. Let's see, there was, the question I have for you is on the proposed side on to Swift. That would you're proposing a walk-in door there?
Yes, just a door. An
Just a-
entrance into the unit.
A walk-in door, not a garage door?
Nope, no garage.
Okay.
Just a driveway.
All right, thank you for clarifying that. Were there any questions for the applicant? All right, we're all.
Can I just point out one other thing, as far as the driveway thing? Just one short block down from us, on the corner of Swift, also on Swift and Coleridge, there's a house that has 2 driveways. And it's, I don't know if it was grandfathered in or whatever, but it's literally 2 houses down from us. And they have 2 driveways as well. So, and I don't think aesthetically it's even noticed or acknowledged. They have a garage underneath that comes right out onto Swift. And then up on Coleridge, they have another driveway as well. So,
All right, thank you. Any other questions? I think we're all set. You could have a seat. Mr. Dolan, you have the right to, no, it would just be you. If you okay and want to rest, that's fine. If you wanted to,
I'm not picking on the Dawes in what they want to do. But in 5 years from now, someone else is going to buy that, not in 5, in 10 years from now, when they sell, that person has the opportunity to buy it and rent out both units. If that's not a multifamily neighborhood, I don't know.
well, they'd have to live there. The owner would have to live there.
Well, you say 5 years. Oh, is the clock recurring every 5 years?
Yes.
Every owner?
Yes.
Okay, I guess I'm looking at paragraph 5, and didn't understand.
Yeah, that would be applying only to those, in 5 years from now, if they still own the property, they have the right, if they didn't want to have, their mother live there anymore. I couldn't imagine that, but that could happen maybe, probably's happened somewhere. But if another owner, in years forward come in, they would have to live there for 5 years.
Oh, so the clock is reset upon the 5-year clock is reset upon every new owner.
I'm going to look at our alderwoman who crafted that language. And if,
You can't say there's no.
I didn't craft the language, but that was my understanding.
yeah, I was just, that won't get picked up on the mic, but our alderwoman was saying that's the spirit and intent of that language.
Well, the deed restriction of the covenant that's recorded, because the Dawes street. Bill, I'll get out of the way. I come back to my point about multifamily. You know, two different families are living in the same thing. It's a multifamily neighborhood. It might be owner-occupied multifamily. I have a property that has a 600 square foot one bedroom and then a 3-bedroom downstairs. I think in one of the documents I say ADUs are not the same because multifamilies are all comparable units or something like that. But yeah, I don't want to pick on them. Please consider it always has to be owner-occupied, and then also limiting, requiring a 30-day rental.
All right,
Because otherwise, it's a hotel. I don't want a hotel in my neighborhood.
all right, thank you, Mr. Dolan. All right, with that, I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Thoughts on the case, Ms. Vitale?
I believe the drawings as presented match, the rest of the home. There's the door between the two units. We have the additional curb cut on the side. I don't see from where the side of that property is, and as per testimony, there is one in close proximity that is similar to that. I don't see a problem with the curb cut being too close to the corner. I'm pretty much in favor of the application.
Thank you. Ms. McKay, would you like to weigh in?
Excuse me, I concur with my fellow board member. This is a beautiful home. It's just beautiful, but there was already a door on that side, and I'm not sure whether they're going to be relocating it, bringing it further out. However, I think it meets all the requirements. An ADU is not, in my head, a rental unit, nor does it make it a duplex or a multifamily unit. And it meets all the criteria of an ADU. And so I, too, concur. I'm very much in favor of this.
Thanks. I'll weigh in next, if you don't mind. When I first got the application, I was like, oh, we're up in this neighborhood again, and here's another request for an ADU with a side entrance. But when I looked at the property, I have the same thought process as the applicant does, in that if you want to add an accessory dwelling unit, that side of the house or the Swift side is a reasonable, or maybe the only rational place to put it. I think it's a decent place to put it. And I see the request for the driveway coming out to Swift versus tying it in to the driveway that's existing there. I think that would be awkward, or you'd have to build the accessory dwelling unit on the other side of the house to not have like a yard or driveway. So I see that train of thought. I don't see things much different than Mr. Dolan, in the sense that I was not happy. I was kind of horrified at our training when we learned of the new definition of accessory dwelling units, because it's much closer and crosses over, in my mind, to a duplex. But I think this, our legislators, or our Board of Aldermen, has scaled that back, I think, as much as they can possibly or legally do it with the language that's there, and I'm glad for that. So I mean, I think that the opportunity is there, that accessory dwelling units can cross that line more into a duplex. I don't, again, with the language of 5 years for each owner, I don't think that's going to become much of an issue in Nashua because of that 5-year requirement. I don't have any concerns with this property in terms of that. I don't think that's at all what's being intended here. And I guess one other point is, I'm comforted by the architectural drawings that we have, because when I see that and hold those and look at the house, I think it's been well thought out, and I think it's going to end up looking, as good or better than it does now. When we get requests for things like this, and it's just a stick figure drawing of a foundation, you don't know what you're gonna end up with. And sometimes it does not look like the spirit and intent, which is, just like an addition on a house versus a two-family. I think this will look as it's like supposed to, which is incidental. So I'm favorable to the application as it sits. That's just my thought. Ms. Boras, any thoughts from you?
I actually concur with my colleagues. I believe that what was presented by the applicant fits all of the requirements, and I'm in favor. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Vitale?
I have one question just related to the accessory dwelling unit, and Mr. Falk might be able to answer my question. Let's just say, one, property taxes are affected by, reappraising the property with an addition on it, et cetera. If it goes over that 5 years, and let's say there's two different families on, is it going to be taxed differently then at that? Is it considered, as we're calling it, like a duplex, and is it taxed differently?
Well, it's a good question. I don't think so, because a two-family is a totally different type of land use. And a lot of people seem to be concerned that ADUs are two families. They're just not. They're still single-family homes with an accessory dwelling unit, and they meet a lot of these criteria, so it's still gonna be a single family and taxed and assessed as such. A two-family also has to have, in this neighborhood, or in this zoning district, I should say, has to have a use variance, which is a much higher bar to get approval for from the zoning board. That's a different land use, different building code, different housing code. There's 2 sets of utilities, 2 mailboxes, 2 meters. There's a lot of different things that go into a two-family versus a single-family home with an accessory dwelling unit. This home will still be looked upon as a single-family with an accessory dwelling unit. So the taxes should go up, I would imagine, and their assessed value is gonna go up because they're putting on a nice addition that's gonna increase both of those numbers, which is also gonna be a benefit for the whole neighborhood as well. But as far as, I couldn't say what's gonna happen to their value or anything 5 or 10 years from now. That's, who knows? I would doubt it.
What I wanted to hear was the use difference.
Totally different uses.
That's what I
And
wanted everybody to kind of hear, is the use
Totally
difference.
different.
Thank
A
you.
use variance is a lot different than an accessory dwelling unit. And if these folks had come in a year ago, they wouldn't have needed the variances, both of them. Because that was put in, the variance for the extra curb cut, they meet the overall 24-foot maximum width. They're under that. The variance number 2, which was to allow the second curb cut, that was put in the new ordinance. Also, the doorway facing one of the street frontages was also put in with the new ordinance. If they came in a year ago, all they need is just a special exception for the ADU, and that would be it. So,
Thank you very much.
Any other discussion? If not, I think we're 15-4 favorable. Would you like to make a motion, Ms. Vitale? Would you like to do the special exception first?
Yes. So, let me just double check here. So for case number 1, for the owner, Christopher and Carrie Daw, address is 9 Chaucer Road in zoning district 18. The case of the special exception is listed in the table of uses, 190-15, table 15-1, number 3, and 190-32. If the proposal will not create undue traffic congestion or unduly impair the pedestrian safety. We are talking about one additional relative living within the home. Will not overload public water, drainage, sewer, other municipal systems. All special regulations are being fulfilled. It will not impair the integrity or be out of character with the neighborhood or be detrimental to the health, morals, or welfare of the residents. We do have drawings that are prepared, so we can see that the home will be in the same character of the neighborhood once the building is completed. Attached to that are accessory dwelling units, the 9 conditions, and those will be met as per testimony. Is that
So
good?
we have a motion to approve. I'll second the motion. I'd just like to clarify that that motion includes the special criteria that we discussed and is on the second page here. Is there any other discussion on the motion of approval for special exception? Seeing no other discussion, a show of hands of approval for the special exception, so that carries. Would you like to carry on with a motion for the variances? You could probably just take them both
Yes,
together.
hold on. I can do for the variance. Okay, again, for case number 1, the owner Christopher Carey Daw, 9 Chaucer Road in zoning district 18. Would like to approve the area variance. A zoning restriction as applied interferes with the landowner's reasonable use of the property concerning the unique setting of the property in its environment. No fair and substantial relationship exists between the general purpose of the zoning ordinance and the specific restriction on the property, and the variance would not injure the public and private rights of others. In this case, we're adding on a 750 square foot addition for the mother-in-law. It will benefit this family. It shouldn't interfere the public or private rights of the others. It's within the spirit and intent of the ordinance, will not adversely affect the property values of surrounding properties, parcels. This will probably actually add to the value of the properties, although we have no testimony one way or the other. It's not contrary to public interest. Substantial justice will be served. I motion to approve.
So a motion to approve the 2 variances. I'll second that motion. Any discussion on the motion?
I
Ms.
believe,
Bors?
I believe it was a 700 square foot addition. I believe
Oh, did
that's
I
what
say 750? So-
What was the square footage of that?
700 for the applicant.
700?
I mean, it's below the,
Yeah, it's
it's
below.
not
I knew it
exceeding,
wasn't
so it's
over.
not it doesn't kick it into a variance. Again, the 2 variances were the 10-foot wide curb cut and the new entrance on the front of it. So,
Yeah, but we could just say it's under, it meets the 750
yeah,
square foot
we
requirement.
forget as we sit here what the square footage is, but
You
that wasn't
meet the
germane to the
750
2.
square foot.
So, thank you for that question. Any other thoughts on the motion? Seeing none, a show of hands in favor of the motion for the 2 variances, so that's unanimous. So your application tonight for the special exception and the variances is approved. Congratulations on that. Just remember, there's a 30-day window of appeal. You could pull your permits tomorrow. I would caution you, don't pour concrete for 30 days. See what happens, but you can do what you want. And with that, I'll close the public meeting on case number 1. We good to keep going? I think we're going to keep moving right along. And again, if anybody's come in late, case number 2, the land at Curtis Drive is postponed to the 27th. We're going to move on to case number 3. The owner is Risen and Leasing Corp. The applicant is David Jenks. It's actually Nashua Dom LLC, care of David Jenks. The address is 99 Northeastern Boulevard. The request is a variance to convert an existing bakery, which is Domino's Pizza, currently takeout and delivery, and remove the office portion of the building to construct a 500 square foot restaurant and adding 34 dining seats. This is, again, 99 Northeastern Boulevard. It's in the Park Industrial Zone, Ward 6. Hi, good evening. If you could give us your name and address and walk us through your application.
Yes, thank you. My name is Paul Avery. I'm with Oak Consulting Group in Newburyport, Massachusetts. With me tonight is David Jenks, the applicant from Danvers, Massachusetts.
Great, and if you'll be speaking away from the podium, you could just pull that mic off and hold it if you were going to be pointing to some things there.
Okay.
Because if it's more than about 10 inches away, it really drops off. The audio
Okay.
almost goes to nothing. So keep going.
Good, thank you. As noted, we are requesting a variance to allow a restaurant use, and that's the LBCS code 2500 in the Park Industrial District. The site, we were going to bring a site plan. It didn't quite make it. We have some photographs here, but I think you have the site plans anyway. But the existing Domino's restaurant has been there operating for approximately 20 years. The building is a total of 7,200 square feet, more or less, of which approximately 2,500 is the Domino's, and the remaining 4,700 is an office warehouse space, which is currently unoccupied. Our plan, and I might have David quickly walk you through it here with a little more detail, is to remove the office warehouse portion of the project, of the building, do about a 500-foot expansion to the Domino's store with a complete renovation of the interior.
Let
and
me
then
just jump
the-
in. Is there anybody in the audience who can't see this and wants to see it? If you want to see it and you can't, you could maybe sit up here or angle that around, or maybe nobody else has an interest in this case. That's a good spot right there. I think everybody can see it. All right, so if you could charge ahead.
Sure, okay, and I'll let David give you a quick walkthrough of the floor plan there. But the key metrics on this thing is we're adding 40 customer seats, and we're also, with the space that's being taken down in the existing office warehouse portion of the building, we have expanded parking. And so I'll turn over to David here quickly.
Yeah, a little more force. Yep, there you go.
All right, how's that work? What we're looking to do, if you guys have been by the site, you'll know.
Again, I'm just, you're David Jenks. If
My
you
name's
could just
David Jenks. Yep,
Jenks.
currently the owner of Domino's Pizza.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to have that on the record so it gets on
Awesome.
the transcription.
So currently, we have the entrance on the side road where customers and drivers come in. And with what we've been doing with Domino's for the past 4 years now, I'm sure you've seen the commercials. We're tearing our stores down, taking sledgehammers to them. So this is the next store on the agenda to take a sledgehammer to. Part of what Domino's has been doing has been adding seating as a convenience to our customers. And what we would do in this instance on this store is actually flip the entire thing 90 degrees so that the storefront would be facing Northeastern Boulevard as opposed to the side road. As Paul said, we'd be adding seating for 40 customers. Everything else is pretty much the same as what we have right now as far as, the ovens, coolers, so on and so forth. We did do, I don't know if this was included in your plan, but we did do some elevations for this, which show what the front would be. This is what it would look like facing Northeastern Boulevard now.
Yeah, that one isn't in our plan.
No.
Oh,
It's not.
It is.
It
Okay.
is. I'm sorry, it is. Yep.
It is.
This is not quite as big, but this is what it looks like right now. So basically, we have just, a lot of landscaping and not able to see very much on the front of the building. I have a couple more elevations that I'll share with you, and then I'll hand the microphone back to Paul. This would be the side elevation. This would be where the current entrance is right now. And I think you can see this. And then I'll flip it around so you guys can see it. You said it wasn't in your,
It is.
oh, you have it. Okay, you do.
Yeah, we
Okay.
do have it. I was
So
mistaken.
this will end up being the driver entrance. So we'll have one entrance for customers, another entrance for drivers, so that they're not stumbling over each other as they're trying to get through.
And the
front door.
customer entrance, is that proposed to be facing Northeastern Boulevard?
That is correct, yes.
And so the driver's entrance basically remains the current entrance?
Correct,
Okay.
correct. And then, part of the proposal is to actually take down half the building, as Paul said, and add parking with a curb cut on Northeastern Boulevard. So customers would actually park on Northeastern Boulevard and walk to the front of the store.
All right. We have a question from Ms. McKay.
Okay?
In your application, it states 34 seats. In your comments, you stated 40. Could you let me know which it actually is?
Thirty-two. That was changed after the fact for occupancy load, so it is actually 32. That's the max we can have.
Okay, so it's 32.
It is.
Okay, thank you. And another question, when I look at the pictures, and not to say it doesn't look aesthetically pleasing, because it does, are we gonna have a signage issue? All the signs I see here, and just because I've been sitting on the zoning board for a little while, signs have a way of being some of the biggest problems. And so I want to know, is that sign going to be an issue? And maybe that's a Mr. Falk question.
Well, they didn't apply for any sign variances, so there's still ample time for them to submit
Okay.
a sign application that would meet the ordinance. I believe they're allowed 1.5 times the building frontage for signage, so it looks like the 2 domino signs on top would probably meet the code. I'm not sure about the large one on the side where it has all the text going down with
yeah.
100% real
The
pizza
hand
dough.
tossed, yeah.
That may not fit in there, but we can certainly work with them moving forward to see exactly how many square feet they'd be allowed.
Okay, and maybe that's just an FYI to bring it to your attention that that could be an issue you should really work with Mr. Falk on.
Absolutely.
We'll be in discussions about that, but
Thanks.
Yeah, normally I would go through Barlow Signs. They usually take care of all my sign permits, so they'll tell me what conforms, what I can do. This is just basically an elevation, just to give you guys an idea of what we're looking for. And just that, the second one, I don't know if it falls under signage or not, but this is a graphic that's not lit. It just kind of goes on the building. It can either be painted on or a plastic sign, one or the other.
Okay.
I think just another way of capturing Ms. McKay's concerns is that, your application tonight is for this proposal of the 32 seats. We have some renditions with some signs on it. If the restaurant were approved tonight, that doesn't mean that whatever signs are on this are approved. It's not like, hey, that was a picture we had, so we're good to go. That would be, the signage is a different situation. Mr. Falk calculates rather precisely, and a lot of the thickness of this zoning book is signage, and so that still applies, even if these pictures tonight are above that.
Absolutely understood.
Yeah. Ms. Vitale has a question for you.
I think the only thing, and I was thinking the signage also, but the other thing that I was thinking it might fall under planning board is that additional curb cut that's going in. Planning?
yes, should this request be supported tonight, there will be a requirement to go to the planning board because there is a new curb cut on Northeastern Boulevard. There's also, the building is a completely different configuration. There's a new parking lot added, so it would require a site plan.
Yeah, that's
They're-
understood.
I'm sure they're aware of that, so.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I have a question. I know you guys have been there a long time. You said 20 years, and I thought it was longer than that. So I'm glad that you're still in business, and I hope it's going well. One of the, I guess, I can certainly understand the rationale for the proposed expansion on this very site, because probably everyone around exit 4 and 5 knows exactly, where your store is. This being Park Industrial Land, which is why we're here tonight. If it was not Park Industrial Land, if it were many other zoning districts, you wouldn't even have to come here because by right, you could have a restaurant. So just for clarification for maybe other folks who don't deal so much with zoning, that's the only reason you're here tonight, because this is a Park Industrial Zone, which, except for a little bit right near exit 5, like Christopher's Pizza and where the Shell station is, that's highway business. I think you'd be fine in that area as well. I've got a bit of a concern because this land is set aside, so to speak, for park industrial uses. You know, right near there, for example, Teradyne, companies like that. Certainly that, I mean, this economy's been down a little bit, but I'm a bit, you know, many restaurants would love to kind of get a foot in the door in a park industrial area because restaurants aren't permitted there. So I understand why you're seeking to expand right here, because you've been here a long time and it's been working for you. But I am struggling a bit to kind of overturn, you might say, the park industrial aspect. Had you considered of any locations, perhaps even some right nearby, you know, quarter, half mile down the street in zone that's permitted?
I have to say, I've been looking for 3 years now.
Wow.
I've been looking, and I've been down to City Hall. I've looked through the zoning maps, even for areas that were zoned correctly that might have residential houses on it that I could have purchased and converted over to a retail site. I have struck out on all aspects. You are probably familiar with the store we have on Amherst Street. We just moved it from 419 up to 270 in with the Aldi Plaza. I'm kind of restricted also on how I could move this store because of our delivery area, so I can't get too close to the other store, and I need to be centrally located also within Nashua just to be able to give good service to everybody. If I were to move to, you know, for instance, you know, down off Exit 1 or something like that, I wouldn't be able to give service to the entire city from that store anymore. So I know Paul has some other rationale with regard to the industrial park and you know, restaurants and what the spirit, I believe, of that was. And I guess the last thing I would just add is that while maybe other restaurants would want to come down there, even for myself, if I could find some place that was more retail located, something, I would go there in a second. I'm here just because I'm living in what I have been able to find. And it's worked for 20 years.
All right, thank you. I didn't know if you had something to say also. Go
Well,
right ahead.
we're prepared to discuss the 5 criteria if you'd like to. We did outline that in the narrative. If you've read through it and understand it all, we can shorten the presentation here. If you'd like us to walk through it, we can do that too.
I know myself, I've, you know, read every word of it, but maybe if you'd like to tick through it just to make sure you cover it and everybody's heard you, go right ahead.
Okay. So, as we've said a number of times, that this site was, and it was about 20 years ago, permitted under the use as a bakery, and the bakeries are allowed up to 10,000 square feet or something like that. But by adding the seating in, this use is no longer a bakery, it becomes a restaurant, and that's why we're here, because that's not allowed in the PI district, the exception being with a special permit if it's 25% or less of the floor area, and the remaining 75% is the industrial use. We can't meet that criteria. Even if we didn't knock down the office warehouse space, we still couldn't meet that. So the 5 criteria, number 1 being that it's not contrary to the public interest. And we've hit on some of these points get a little bit redundant, and some of them we've hit on already, but we feel that's the case because this is an existing business. It's established in the district. The seating is a small change to it. The fundamental business isn't going to change. And generally speaking, Domino's, about 75% of the business is delivery, and about 25% is takeout. When facilities do add the seating in, that typically comprises about 10% of the business. So the seating rounds it out, but it doesn't dramatically change it. So I don't feel that there's a negative impact to the public interest as a result of this. We're also adding some additional parking, which should help alleviate potential neighborhood concerns if we're underparked at any particular point in time. The spirit of the ordinance, we interpret the 25% criteria as a situation where you might have a cafeteria in support of the industrial use that the food service isn't supposed to be a destination restaurant, but interpret the spirit as more as being that the food service supports the surrounding use of the PI district. I think we do that. That basically, this is not a destination restaurant. It's not a restaurant or a facility that would then be concerned about noise impacts or construction activities of abutting properties and therefore restricting the growth and development of the surrounding businesses because they may be noisy or things like that. Again, have operated in this district for about 20 years. Number three being substantial justice. We feel it's substantial justice because it's allowing the business to grow. As David pointed out, that this is the trend in what the Domino's restaurants are doing, the Domino's stores are doing. They're adding in seating, and this is all consistent with the advertisement of knocking the stores down that you may have seen on the television, and this allows the owner to grow his business and remain competitive and consistent with the Domino's standards. We don't feel that it's going to reduce the value of the surrounding properties. We feel that these elevations here indicate that there's an aesthetic improvement here. It'll also improve the level of service, which may be taken advantage of by the surrounding businesses. And again, a little bit redundant here, but the hardship issue is that not allowing this would, in essence, restrict the potential growth and development of an existing business that's operated here successfully for approximately 20 years.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Jenks or Mr. Avery? Just have one question further for you. Just a thought, like, so you've been there a long time, you've been looking around a long time, and your testimony is, and I believe every word of it, you're kind of locked into this kind of tight geographic area because of other stores and delivery needs. Just the idea of, like, the thought I just throw out, if there was some sort of like stipulation that said, if I was compelled to say, yes, you have this special situation where you've been there a long time and your business, your Domino's business, is kind of locked into this really tight spot right here, can't move around. If this variance were to go with your business and say, not with the land, in other words, if 5 years from now you decided to retire to Florida and, a Burger King or something could move in, which is, a step further away and has no hardship, just wondering if that stipulation, could it be legally enforceable? I don't know in the future, but I just throw that out to you and ask, like, what would you think if it wasn't a Domino's business, it went back to the existing park industrial zoning, if you would think of a stipulation like that? Or I also asked that to Mr. Avery, just see what your thoughts are.
I think it's a judgment call, and David is the stakeholder in the property. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think that would be an unreasonable request because the conditions that we've described here are unique to the Domino's business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. I am Domino's. I'm not, obviously buying a real estate is the way to accomplish what I need to accomplish here for this business. But I would say if somebody else wants to come in, if Burger King wants to come in after the fact, they would have to come before you and argue the same point that I'm arguing here. So I wouldn't expect this to get passed on to somebody else automatically.
All right, just a question I had. Were there any other questions for the applicant? If not, you could have a seat. You could leave your thing there. We'll see if there's any other interest here in the audience. Is there anybody else to speak in favor of the proposed expansion of Domino's on Northeastern Boulevard to a restaurant? Anybody with questions, concerns, or opposition to the 99 Northeastern Boulevard Domino's? Questions, concerns, opposition? Going once, twice? Seeing none, close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Thoughts, Ms. Vitale?
Just a question, Mr. Falk. I know that going away from park industrial into this type of business, it does, raise a little bit. It's kind of like what happened on Amherst Street, going over to all the retail and everything there. How long has that attached business been empty?
The warehouse, I think.
The
is
warehouse
two.
part?
Yeah.
Don't quote me on it, but I don't think that long, maybe a year or so, couple of years. I'm not sure. I know we've had building permits for the work next door, like there's a business office in there, but I don't know exactly. I don't think it was that long, but you guys might know better than I do, but it may be, I want to say at least maybe a year or two.
Okay, I just was wondering,
Not sure.
it's not that big of a space that's looking to be removed. Probably my biggest concern in the whole property is more the planning board's side. What I do see is the way the Domino's is, and I work near the one on Amherst Street, is the fact that you get a lot of that in and out traffic from the deliveries and that type of thing. So it won't interfere with any residential people that live in that area. So for that reason, I'm kind of good with the spot going from the size and the scope that it is now into the restaurant part of it. You know, it does have an area that it does serve. It's a pretty good location, you know, within Nashua. Yes, Mr. Falk. I know you're.
Yeah, well, one thing is that they're not having a drive-through, like, you know, like someone mentioned Burger King or the McDonald's. With the drive-throughs, that's a whole different look of the land and activity with cars going in and out, driving all around. And the order board and the menu board and the speakers and, you know, this one is just really, it's not that. They're still gonna have a lot of drivers doing the deliveries, of course, because they do have a thriving delivery business, but traffic-wise, it's probably gonna be, I would think, very similar to what they have now. They'll be providing space inside for customers to eat, but they may not have as many deliveries, so I think it may be a wash with traffic.
Yeah,
They
no,
still have to go to the
I
planning
look
board.
at it not so much the driving, but the actual being able to use it, you know, for their deliveries and everything. You know, I look at the location as being a pretty good one for that. It's right on, you know, right on Northeastern Boulevard. It's not set back into the the industrial park area. So, you know, there's little deli across the street. So, you know, it kind of seems like it's fit there really well for 20 years to expand it to the restaurant area. I think I'm pretty much in favor as it is, and I hope the planning board addresses the entrance, the other curb cut and how it's used.
All right, thank you. Ms. McKay, thoughts?
I concur with my colleague. I think that the use is not going to be adverse to the neighborhood, that's for sure. I think the neighborhood or the area can support the cars coming and going. I also think that the 32 seating, it's not large, but I think what it'll accommodate is maybe those businesses that are around who are looking to come for lunch, or maybe just for people who are standing, waiting to get whatever it is they've ordered. So I don't see this as a bad thing. I actually see it as a support for the businesses. I actually think it's a good thing. I'm in favor of this.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Boris?
I'm also in favor, concur with both my colleagues. It's been there for 20 years, and I think it'd be a great addition to that area by enlarging it. And aesthetically, it's beautiful. I love what was presented to us.
All right, thank you. My thoughts, I think I think I have pretty consistent concerns about the turning over of Park Industrial land. I'm not gonna make a big spiel here at all. I think there's 3 folks in favor. I'd be more inclined, I'd be favorable if we had a stipulation on it, to limit it to the Domino's business, but, I think it might be easier if you just wanna throw out a motion and let's go with that.
Quick thing, I was going to suggest a stipulation also. That is the one thing, because we don't know where that industrial warehouse will take us, you know, in the coming years. And I would say that if, in fact, it would ever come to that point, I would like to see it revert back to the Park Industrial, and anybody that's looking for it comes in on their own merit.
Would you like, oh, yes.
So then, my question around the motion, I don't have an issue with the stipulation either. The applicant didn't have an issue. So my question is, this would be stipulated that only as long as the Domino's brand owned and operated this business, would this variance be active? Yes, no?
Okay, so what if, just hypothetically, what if Domino's sells this to Papa John's or another pizza restaurant that also doesn't have, that has the same or similar characteristics as they do? No drive-through, sit-down restaurant with the same number of seats, same kitchen, same ovens, same pretty much menu. And would you all want this to come back if it's a similar thing? I mean, it would definitely have to go back if it has a drive-through or it's a fast food with a more expansive menu, like with the menu board and things like that, because that's not allowed in the zoning district. But, yeah, I mean, if you want it to just stay as the Domino's, I think that's a reasonable request, and the applicant has stated that they would be okay with that. But that's what it could be. I mean, it could be going to like a Papa John's or another kind of a restaurant that serves pizza and subs and calzones that's very similar to Domino's. And for all intents and purposes, it's about the same use.
So then how do we best word that so that it remains as the Domino's as the applicant?
But you'd have to just state that this request is only being supported for only the Domino's. Any future use of the building, should Domino's leave this premise, would have to come back to the board.
Yeah.
Okay, so
They're okay with it. I mean, you know, if they're selling it, they're gonna be gone anyway, but, you know, we have to look at the land, you know, in the future, so. It's, as long as it's a reasonable request for, you know, people going forward, you know, besides Domino's, but another future restaurant, you know, as long as it's a reasonable request, the board can put that on.
Okay, well, it's clarified, correct?
Yep. Well, I guess I'll make a motion to suspend the rules and reopen the public hearing. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
All in favor? So if you'd like to come to the microphone, again, just give us the name so it's on the record and let us know what's on your mind.
Okay, David Jenks, Danvers, Mass. So just one thing, here in the conversation here, in order to do this, I'm taking a little bit of a leap, purchasing a piece of property that's functional and probably paying more so than what my ultimate use is going to be. So I'm buying an 8,000 square foot building for the normal price per square foot and taking that down to 3,000 square feet. So I am making a sizable investment here. I did like the idea of being able to use this for something that's similar, yet not something that's a drive-through, so that in case 20 years down the road, I decided I want to sell to I don't know, Papa John's. I can't even believe I'm saying that. But
Yeah,
another,
really.
What I can think of at the time.
another food establishment that I would have a right to do that with certain parameters. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I thought that was a decent idea. No drive-throughs, no nothing like that.
All right, thank you. Ms. Vitale?
So that would go to a use type thing, a similar use, I would think, would be exactly how it is.
See, should this occur, if we were to get probably a sign permit, land use permit for a change of use from Domino's to a similar type of pizza restaurant, to our staff, that would be like, it's the same thing. There's no real change in the land use or the characteristics of the land use. But if there was a zoning board action, our building files would alert us to the fact that, you know, they may have to come back to this board, so.
So use would
I'll say it'd
be,
be to us, it's the same use, whether it's, you know, Domino's, and I know every restaurant, you know, is proud of their brand and, you know, what they serve and all that. But if it goes from Domino's to another similar type of restaurant, you know, to us, it's the same thing, for the most part.
so a similar use or any additional building that takes place on the property would have to come back to
Back,
the
right.
zoning board.
Okay.
Or any change, like a drive-through, that's a big change, that's not even allowed in the zoning
Right.
district. So I know, like, across the street, they have a similar type of use in, their pizza place, so.
Okay.
So, in other words, 20 years down the road, it couldn't become a Dunkin' Donuts.
No.
Okay. That's a big
Without,
drop.
not without going before the zoning
Without
board and the
coming back
planning
here.
board, yeah.
Right.
It's just for clarification.
Okay.
Okay.
Like to make a motion?
Okay. On case number 3, for owner Raisin Leasing Corporation, applicant is Nashua Dom LLC, CO David Jinks, address is 99 Northeastern Boulevard. They are requesting a use variance from the Land Use Code, Section 190-15, Table 15-1, to convert an existing bakery, Domino's Pizza, takeout and delivery, and remove the office warehouse portion of the building to construct a 500-square-foot,
Addition.
construct a 500-square-foot addition to the restaurant and add 34, which we've heard now is 32 seats, dining seats. This is a land use variance. The variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property, and the benefit sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant pursue other than an area variance. Per testimony, this applicant has said that he has been looking for about 3 years for a suitable site that he could possibly move it to, and has been unsuccessful. And this has been a successful location as the business stands now. It is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. It will not adversely affect the property values of the surrounding parcels. Again, he's been here 20 years with no comment regarding the property values. It's not contrary to public interest. He's established there as the Domino's brand. His business is not going to substantially change. It was only going to change in the size of the building. Substantial justice will be served. The owner will be able to grow his business and add it and hopefully be there for another 20 years. There will be a special condition to this approval, and that stipulation will be that it will stay within the same use as the property is now, and it will revert back to the PI zone. If it does not, any substantial changes to the building or any changes at all to the building, and that use will come back before the zoning and planning board.
So we, all set? Yep.
Yes.
So is there a
Approval.
second to the motion?
second it.
Seconded, and any discussion on the motion? See, Ms. McKay is still catching up on her motion here.
Well, I wanted to make sure I got.
Sure, no problem.
I'm sorry. Okay.
So, show of hands in favor of that motion. See, myself, 3, and opposed would be myself. I'd just like to say that I value the Park Industrial land, and if I felt it could be just contained to the Domino's with that special condition, I could support it. But it's supported nonetheless, and I appreciate that. And with that, I'll close. Oh, so your motion, your request passes. I say the board wishes you continued good luck. And with that, I'll close the public meeting on case number 3. Best wishes to you.
You're welcome.
Are we good to go? Keep going? All right, we're still good to go without taking a break. Again, if you're here for 393 Main Street, that's been postponed to February 27th. So I'll open case number 5. The owners are Jason and Anne Marie McNulty. The address is 1B East Dunstable. The request is the following: to encroach up to 22 feet into the 25-foot required front yard setback for a parking area, and number 2, to exceed the maximum of 50% of area of the front yard paved, 86% is existing, and number 3, to exceed the maximum of a 24-foot wide curb cut. 2 driveways are proposed for a total of 26 feet. Hi, good evening. If you would give us your name and address and walk us through your request, please.
Yes, good evening. My name is Jason McNulty at 1B East Dunstable Road here in Nashua.
Ann McNulty, 1B East Dunstable Road in Nashua.
Hi. We have your application with a couple of drawings here. Would you like to just step us through, first of all, like how we got here tonight and et cetera, et cetera?
Right, so the center of my yard used to have a circle horseshoe driveway in the middle, and over the years they tried to rejuvenate the grass, things like that, without success. So over the course of the past couple of years, I thought of other options and what I can do to kind of dress it up a lot better than it looks at that moment. So the other driveway, part of the driveway there was falling apart in certain areas, starting to sink and crack. And so we decided that we were gonna cover that, pave that over, and then pave into the center of the horseshoe, if you will, as well, to eliminate some of that mud and stuff that collected during the rain and things like that.
Okay. All right, so was asphalt recently added or something, or was anything actually done, or how, did this get flagged by someone, or?
It was added, yeah, it was done. We
Okay.
did the center and covered over where the existing driveway was, and then a little bit on the side.
Okay, and when did that get done?
That was November, yeah.
November, okay. All right. Let's see, are there any questions for the McNultys? I guess I have one question, and that is, it was hard for me to see, but is this what's there now? Like, okay,
Yes, that's, yeah,
okay.
that's the existing, yes.
And how many cars are typically parked there? And is this a single-family home?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and how many cars are typically parked there?
There's 6 at the moment,
6.
yeah. One is a work vehicle.
Okay.
My daughter's back home from school, so
Uh-huh.
she's back
Okay.
with her vehicle as well, yeah. And my son's home too, so.
Okay. All right. Do we have any other questions for the applicant? Ms. Vitale, I think, has a question for you.
Did it always have the 2 curb cuts? That was a,
Yes, that was always open, yes. I didn't encroach into any of the curb cuts or anything like that. I just kind of squared off kind of what was there and just finished the center area with leaving a few feet out by the street. You know, I didn't want to totally cover it up. I want to, you know, put some bushes and some things there as well, you know, as the thing gets up. That center part there was just, it was a swamp, you know, most times, the rain and things like that, and so.
Yep, go ahead.
I absolutely, it bothers me when I see so much asphalt put down for, you know, for a single-family house and, you know, in the situation, I understand you have the 2 curb cuts and that, would you take any of it out?
I'm sorry?
Do we take out we left the dirt by the flower beds to put some plants, and we left the dirt at the end of the driveway, and we're gonna put some,
Along the street there, yeah.
we're gonna put some bushes and maybe like a picket fence. and mulch.
Small little picket, thing to dress up the area there.
The way it was is when you stepped out of the car, we stepped right into mud. It was slippery and uneven surfaces. I twisted my ankle a few times.
Okay. Didn't try edging or anything like
Yes, I
that?
did.
Okay.
Any other questions? I think we're all set at the moment. We'll say you could have a seat. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Was there anybody else to speak in favor of this proposed driveway expansion? Anybody with questions, concerns, or opposition? I see a hand back here. If you'd like to come to the microphone and let us know what's on your mind. Ma'am, I think, yeah, would you like to, anybody who has questions, concerns, or opposition has up to 5 minutes, so I'd like to hear what's on your mind. And again, if you could start with your name and address for the record.
My name is Cynthia Babbitt. I'm at 2 East Dunstable, directly across the street.
Okay, welcome.
And one of the things you talked about initially was the diminished value. And I look across the street and the whole front yard is paved.
Oh, if you could get a little closer to the mic, Tim's saying it's not
Yeah,
catching.
you can pull it down.
There you go,
Okay.
thank you.
The whole front yard is paved along with the sides of the house. There were 9 cars there all week long and yesterday and today, so 6 or 7, isn't it? There's 5 out front that they're driving. There's a lot of adults there, so they need those 5 cars. But they don't need the 4 that have been sitting on the side of the house through the last couple of snowstorms and not moved. I feel it's a real eyesore, and it does diminish the value of my property. If I was home shopping now and went by that house, I wouldn't even go look at my house. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Any questions? We're all set, thanks. Anybody else with questions, concerns? Now or never. Come on up. Welcome again. If I could ask you for your name and address.
My name is Cynthia Gale. I live at 4 Catherine Street.
Right around the corner.
I am at a butter
Mhm.
to the property at 1B East Dunstable Road. My side yard touches their backyard. So I'm not directly impacted visually by looking at this new driveway. Jokingly, in my terminology, I call it a parking lot. Before I go any further, I'm not looking to offend or malign or present a hardship to the McNultys, but it seems to me that a process that's in place to do things like this has not been done. Why are they seeking a variance for work that's already been done? That doesn't calculate in my head.
Well, I'm just gonna, could you speak to that?
Well, typically, people ask for a variance, and if they get approval, then they go ahead and do the work and get a building permit.
Right.
Or whatever that is. Sometimes people build sheds or garages or expand their driveways, and a permit may not have been obtained, and someone calls our code enforcement division, and they'll go out and inspect what's been done or what's been built, and then, they'll contact the owners, and, they'll have to apply for a variance, and that's kind of what happened here.
Okay.
So they didn't apply for any permits or anything. We don't really give permits for driveways anyway. But there are some variances that they needed to apply for.
But a permit is not necessary to
Well-
enlarge a driveway?
Our department, the Planning and Zoning Department, which I represent, we do not give permits for driveways. That's up to the Department of Public Works and the Street Department. we have this land use ordinance that has criteria in there for driveway: width, number of spaces, parking spaces, loading spaces, handicap spaces. There's all kinds of things in here that we still follow, and we just don't actually have a physical permit to give to somebody to do this. There are restrictions as to parking in the front yard setback. There's also restrictions on the number of curb cuts. There's also restrictions on the width of the curb cut. And that's something that, have been exceeded in this request, or what's been done, and therefore that's why they've applied for the variances for them. There's no other way that our staff can really process this unless they go through the proper requirements to ask either for a variance or a permit to get something. If they had asked for a permit for this, we would not have been able to give them one because they exceeded the 3 items that they're asking for a
Exactly.
variance for.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay.
So that's why they're properly here to ask for what they've done. And now it's not up to our staff anymore. Once someone does something that's above and beyond what our land use ordinance allows, then people have to come before the Zoning Board of Adjustment. They're a higher authority than our staff, and they can make the proper requirements to grant relief, so to speak, from our code.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Gale? All right. Okay, I think this fella's going to speak. Come on up. Were you going to speak? Yep, and then I think there's a woman here, and was there anybody else? You could come on up, sir, and give us your name and address and let us know what's on your mind.
Good evening, members.
Hi.
Mr. Falk. My name is Michael Siciliano, and I reside at 95 Taylor Street, Nashua, New Hampshire, for the last 23 years. I've also been a resident of the South Main Street neighborhood for over 50 years, so I know the area quite well. I filed the official complaint to the zoning, building, site plan, and land use complaint form with the Code Enforcement Office on November 30th of last year, 2017. I did so after I witnessed that the applicant had a contractor pave almost the entire front yard of the subject property known as 1B East Dunstable Road in Nashua, New Hampshire, which occurred during the week on or about November 15, 2017. I also filed the complaint because I'm very much concerned and truly saddened by the deterioration of our residential neighborhoods in Nashua from within. What I mean by within is our own residents. The decline of private properties is everywhere throughout the city, brought on mostly by code violations. Whether it's zoning, building, or land use violations, it is out there, and it is causing many of Nashua residents to be upset about what they see, what they drive by, and in some cases, what they have to live next door to. This case is a perfect example of my concerns. The structure is a single-family residence consisting of 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, built on 7,666 square feet of RA-zoned land. The applicant, with total disregard for the neighbors, the neighborhood, zoning, or building codes, egregiously put a parking lot in the front yard. I assume no permit was issued by the Public Works Department for driveway replacement. With total disregard for the environment, including their own, the applicant buried asphalt debris on the left side of the property. The applicant has introduced more impervious surface to the lot, and when added to what is existing probably exceeds the total allowed by code. I don't know what that total amount is. Maybe Mr. Falk can educate us on that. They have caused a burden to the neighborhood with the excessive on-site parking, and now they come before the zoning board seeking forgiveness via a variance. This is wrong and should be totally unacceptable. Prior to the paving of the front yard, the applicant usually parked and/or stored 5 to 7 vehicles in the front yard. Since the completion of the paving project, an average of 9 cars are parked in the front yard on a daily basis. This morning, about 7 o'clock, there were 10 vehicles parked in the front yard. It is hard to tell how many cars are unregistered, but usually it's more than a few. For at least a decade, the applicant has burdened the neighborhood by utilizing the property for commercial gain. Most weeks, one can drive by and see automobiles, sometimes for sale, multiple cars at the same time, multiple cars at once. The applicant has put up appliances, various forms of furniture, and equipment out in the front yard for sale. This address is not a commercially zoned parcel of land. If the applicant wants to sell cars, then maybe they should seek out commercially viable land and set up shop there, but not in the front yard of 1B East Dunstable Road. If the current conditions are allowed to remain, then this board is sending the message that it's okay for anyone else on Main Street or East Dunstable Road to pave their front yard and start selling cars, which I assume nobody wants to see, at least in our neighborhood. The agenda for tonight's public hearing did not indicate that the applicant was also seeking a variance to sell cars commercially on property or to park and store a large number of registered and/or unregistered vehicles in the yard, which I also believe it violates code. By granting variance after the fact is sending the message that rules and regulations and codes do not matter. It makes it seem as if anyone can do anything at any time and simply apply for a variance afterwards. In addition, one infraction or code violation ultimately leads to other and usually multiple violations. Code violations should be not dismissed without consequence. The codes were created for a reason and should be enforced consistently and routinely. Any request for a variance after a code violation is unacceptable and demonstrates a blatant disregard for the rules and regulations. I am very much opposed to this variance. Again, I ask the members of the zoning board to assist the citizens of Nashua in an effort to preserve and promote better quality neighborhoods for our citizens to live and to promote the health and safety of our neighborhoods and to protect our property values. You can do this by voting no and deny this request. Thank you very much.
You just ticked over 5 minutes, but I didn't want to stop you because it sounded like you were at the end. Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Siciliano.
Thank you for your time.
What was your address again?
95 Taylor Street.
Oh, Taylor Street.
Nashua.
Okay, yeah. Are there any questions for Mr. Siciliano? All right, we're all set. Ma'am, did you have something to say? And as she makes her way to the mic, was there anybody else who's going to be speaking tonight? Okay, so you'll be the last person in opposition. Hi, name and address again for the record.
Savard, 4 East Dunstable Road.
Welcome, Ms. Savard.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Siciliano, for hitting all the points very, very well. I agree with everything he just said. It's an eyesore. It's an insult to the rest of us who try to take care of our homes, and it diminishes the property value for all of us. 9 cars in a paved front yard is just unacceptable for a residential neighborhood.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Savard? I think we're all set. All right. Mr. and Mrs. McNulty, would you like to come back? You have the right to address the opposition you've heard.
Yeah.
Again,
At
it's
times,
Mr. and Mrs. McNulty here at the
Yep,
microphone.
Jason McNulty again, returning. Yes, at times I did have some vehicles out there for sale in the past. I haven't in a while. Everything on the property is registered, with the exception of one, which is leaving this week. The intent was not to pave, to make a parking lot to sell vehicles by any means whatsoever. My thought process, as well as my wife's, was that we had the issue in the front of the yard with the dirt that created a swampy area in the rain, snow, was hard to plow, things of that nature. So with questions to the city, different people I talked to about doing this, this is what we decided to do. There was no intent to make a parking lot to sell cars or anything like that. So I didn't bury any asphalt anywhere on the property. I don't know where that came from, but regardless, I'm not, here to argue any of the case. People, can state their concerns, and that's fine with me. I'm not looking, to have an argument with anybody by any means. It's, the reasons for what I did it for are stated in the application as well as I'm stating now, and at this point, it is what it is, I guess. I don't know. There was no other intent to do, car sales or anything like that. So,
Okay.
I don't think it made the property look worse. I don't think it diminished any value in the area. Other people, they have their opinions, which is fine. You know, I respect, you know, everybody's opinion, but in my mind, I don't think that was the case.
All right, well, thank you. I appreciate hearing that there was nothing buried there. I appreciate
No,
hearing that.
yeah.
And there's no intent to have car sales there. I certainly appreciate that. Any questions for the McNultys? I think we're all set. You could have a seat. Again, per our rules, one and only one person who has spoken in opposition can come back, or you could rest your case. I see it. We'll let Mr. Siciliano lead the charge here. You have, again, your name and address so the transcriber gets it right.
Michael Siciliano, 95 Taylor Street, Nashua. Along with my official complaint to Code Officer Kyle Metcalf, I submitted photographs of asphalt buried on the left side of the house, okay, which is frowned upon by the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. Most asphalt goes to a recycling center. What
All right.
the condition of the property, it is a parking lot. You can't tell if it's a single-family home. It looks like an apartment building or a commercial parking lot. I drive by it dozens of times a week to and from my house on Taylor Street. I was absolutely floored when I saw the entire front yard, 86% of it paved. The impervious surface that's been introduced to the property is a big concern to me. It was done maybe without planning. It was done without any stormwater management. It was just, it's like it just dropped out of the sky one day. It was just commented, it is what it is. It doesn't have to be what it is. I request that the zoning board make a decision to restore the property back to its original condition, to remove the entire asphalt parking lot from the front yard. You can't park cars in your front yard. I believe that's against code here in the city of Nashua. You can't have more than one unregistered vehicle in your front yard or on your property. I believe that's the code. I've been going by for a long time. The property is deteriorating. It's deteriorating our neighborhood, my neighborhood.
Just
I'm
again,
dealing with a situation at 84 Taylor Street, around the corner from my house, that hopefully gets resolved. But it's a spreading concern throughout the city, and I believe it's high time for the zoning board to make some tough decisions and deny this variance, and hopefully have the property restored to what it was prior to November 15th of 2017.
All right, thank you. I think Ms. Vitale has a question for you.
The photos that you supplied to Mr. Metcalf, they did show buried items.
They showed buried asphalt to the left side of the property and asphalt, large amounts of asphalt chunks left on the surface on the left side of the property.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I think we're all set. Thanks for your testimony.
Thank you very much for your time.
All right, with that, I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Thoughts, since you're leading off, you want to keep leading off, Ms. Vitale?
Certainly. So because of the time of the year it is and everything, and looking at this one time, I pulled it up on Google Maps, which shows your street view of the property. And clearly, it shows that probably most of the problem was due to driving onto your grass surfaces with vehicles. You can see tire marks on it and everything else. So anytime you continuously drive onto grass, you're eventually going to get the ruts, and you're going to take your grass out if you're not on your driveway. That's what happens. I don't see any reason that had it come before that it would have been something that I would have approved. Again, to pave over an entire area in this type of location for a single-family house, I can't approve this.
All right, thank you. Ms. McKay? Thoughts?
Can I go look? I had looked before. Were you going to consider this email that we have around the street widening? When I must have seen the before rather than the after, but that's an awful lot of asphalt, and I can understand people having agita around this issue, because it's an issue. The only question in my mind is when Mr. Siciliano said that he took pictures of buried asphalt. I don't know how you know that asphalt is buried if it was buried. So that's my question. You can see asphalt on the top, but you can't make a determination if somebody came by afterwards and removed it. Regardless of that comment, I don't know what we do in this type of a situation. It's already been done, but had they have come prior to doing this, I wouldn't have been in favor of it. There's just too much asphalt and not enough grass. Plus, I can't imagine parking 9 cars in front of my house. It just makes no sense to me. So I would hate to see that in my neighborhood if I had to live next door to a house that had 9 cars backed up into it every day. That would, to me, look like a business. And I'll rest my case on that one.
Ms. Vitale?
Did you pull up the
That's what I'm doing.
the Google Maps? I have it up on my phone, so if you wanted to see it.
Okay. Yeah, see, that's what I saw when I looked. But I don't see, so this was all now covered?
Well,
'Cause
this
that's
was the
still-
original horseshoe, as I would call it.
Exactly, that's what I saw.
Yeah, so.
So now it's all covered? That's what I meant.
Except for-
It's just gotten changed.
I guess there's one thing that I probably, this was part of our application. There's a letter from Steve Ducrane. And so, yeah, I read it, but I realized it should probably be read into the record because it's otherwise just in our application that not all the folks have. And Steve Ducrane is our city engineer, is that the right title? City engineer. It says, "Hi Carter, we don't have plans for widening EDR." What's EDR?
East Dunstable Road.
Oh, East Dunstable Road. But planning for changes on a major connector road is important given the location's close proximity to the intersection, and I assume that's the intersection of Main Street, as well as the need for wider shoulders and sidewalk as transportation methods change. I hope the ZBA considers these things when they apply. So that was a letter in our packet from Mr. Ducrane, who was, I would summarize, expressing concerns, and I probably should have read that into the record when we were, in the public hearing, but it's here, and I just wanted to make sure it was, everybody had a chance to hear that. Ms. Boras, thoughts on the matter?
Well, again, I concur with my colleagues, and listening to the opposition, I don't feel that this variance should be approved. Based on the concern of, the value of the other homes, this being completed prior to approval, I just don't feel comfortable with it at all.
Yeah, I guess I'm agreeing with my thoughts are the same as you three. I am, compelled by the testimony of the abutters. Sometimes, properties that sit a certain way a long time. It's just part of the neighborhood. I do drive by this, I mean, I don't live far from it, but I guess I don't pay attention when I drive down the road. And I guess what I'm learning tonight is there's a feeling it's changed character a lot with the paving of this. I think it is I feel it's a valid concern that the abutters have. So I'm not in support of these 3 variances, and I guess I'd just leave it at that. Ms. Vitale, would you like to make a motion? We'll just move on, or would we further the discussion?
I guess I'll go ahead. You want to do this one? This
Sure.
one might be good for you.
I'll be happy to hazard a motion here. So for the owner of the McNulty's at 1B East Dunstable Street, the request is really an after-the-fact variance for 3 requests. One is parking that's 22 feet into the 25-foot required front yard setback. Number 2 is the exceeding of front yard paved area by our code is 50%. What's calculated now is 86%. And of course, the 2 curb cuts total 26 feet, where 24 feet is the maximum permitted in code. I think this board finds a variance is not needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property. The intent here, I think the board finds, was an improvement to the parking and driveway in the front yard. I think what the board's finding in unison here is that the amount of pavement put down is not warranted, and that it's not within the spirit and intent of the ordinance to grant this after-the-fact variance or 3 variances. I think the board finds that the amount of pavement is an issue to the property values of surrounding parcels, and it's not contrary to the public interest, and that substantial justice is not served by granting this, and I make a motion to deny the variance or the 3 requests. That's my motion. Is there a second to the motion? Ms. Vitale? Any discussion on the motion? Ms. Vitale?
In a case like this, it's an after the fact. And as much as you don't like to have to go back and deny something that's already in place, there is a point that it's in the best interest of those surrounding the property owner, and probably in the end, it might be a benefit to the property owner, but that we deny things after the fact, and they have to go back and remedy the situation.
Right, and I guess while we're discussing the motion, if this denial stands, in other words, if this goes through a denial, that doesn't mean that the board is in consideration of any overreach of a driveway or something like that. I look at it, if this had come before me initially, say, as before the request, the way it normally would, I think I'd still be just as hesitant for this amount of pavement. Perhaps there's some middle ground there where you have a stable and good-looking driveway, but also some lawn, which might still exceed some of our code, but not to this degree anyway. What we're confronted for is kind of an up or down decision here tonight with this amount, and I just want to clarify that with this amount, these 3 variances, this board is not favorable to that. So again, we have a motion to deny, seconded by Ms. Vitale. Any other discussion on the motion? Mr. Falk?
Okay, since this is denied, obviously the request to keep this pavement here is not supported. So that means a deconstruction of a portion of what's here. Does the board want to consider a time frame to have that be done by?
Ms. Vitale?
We're still got a little bit of winter here. but I hate to be the one to say when you can take in and put out a driveway, because I don't know exactly what the conditions need to be of the surrounding pieces and the under part. If it can be done while it's frozen, or if it has to be wait till a thaw happens. I'm not sure, Mr. Falk, you might be familiar with what happens.
Well, right now, paving companies really aren't in the operation that they are in the summer, so I think somewhere around middle of April, early May is when they're out and about installing asphalt and maybe even taking part off, because it's just not really the time of year. So I think it's, probably middle of April or so, when the ground is thoroughly thawed and soft enough for, even the asphalt gets softer to remove, so just a thought for you guys to.
And I have one other thought. When we do the circular driveways, is it usually stay the same distance all the way around for width?
Generally. Now, they have had this horseshoe
Right.
for quite some time.
And I can see that on the
Yeah, I mean, we look
early
back
pictures.
to 2000, that they did have this horseshoe driveway here for quite a while. So, and they do have the 2 existing curb cuts, so, that is something that, had they had just repaved what was existing out there, we wouldn't have had there wouldn't have been any issues with that, because it's all existing conditions, so.
Right.
It's just the added conditions of, getting closer to the street and up by the home, so.
Okay. I just wondered.
I guess I'd be inclined to allow more time than that. I mean,
too.
Things can just start thawing in April. I'd be more, I don't want to,
July or August, or.
yeah, I feel like at least to the end of May. I think it's not an easy situation for anyone here. I think a little more time would be appropriate. I'd be more inclined to say like the end of May. I think that would give plenty of time. I thought.
Half of me says yes, but then you have quite a bit of rain. It's, in the meantime, you have all the rain and the runoff and the melting and everything that takes place in the area also, and those waters will have nowhere to go except they're not good, it's asphalt.
I guess I was just thinking logistically, I mean, I'm assuming that if something's gonna be taken out, it would have to be done by, a contractor, a paving company. Their busy time is right after the spring thaw, and it might be awkward to do, just get good help sometimes quick. I was just not trying to put it in the eye of any of the neighbors or anything, like they were given an excess amount of time. I was just thinking it's sometimes hard to get people to get good work done quick.
I'm fine with the end of May.
I guess I'll amend the motion to say that if there's, with the deconstruction, if we want to call it that, to allow to the end of May to have that done. So I amend the motion to put that time frame on it. Is there a second to that amendment? So I have a motion on the table, essentially to deny and remedy by the end of May, or maybe if there's another element or design that the applicant wants to discuss, that's fair game also to come back if there's less of an overage or something like that. So again, a motion on the table to deny, seconded by Ms. Vitale. No further discussion, no show of hands in favor of the denial. So that's unanimous. So if you've been following along, I'm sorry to say we're not able to give you support on that. That's the way we are tonight. And with that, I'll close. I want to thank everybody for coming out, because I think I'm glad to know that People care about the neighborhood, and I think that applies to everyone here in this room. With that, I'll close the public meeting on case number 5. We have 2 sets of minutes. As I look at the folks, there's not a quorum here for either set of minutes. All right. Have a good night.
Thank you.
I am going to make a motion that we don't act on the minutes because there's not 3 folks from either set of minutes who are here tonight, and I figure we'll just bypass and vote on those at the next meeting.
Technically, you don't have to have people who are here to, on any minutes, but
I mean, it's not like the minutes have to be,
If we could have a quiet here, we're still going. I mean, I've looked over the minutes myself. I don't have any issues. If you have looked over those and are comfortable with the way they presented, I'm happy to make a motion to approve as stated. Ms. Vitale?
Yeah, I looked them over. I didn't see anything that I had concerns about at all.
All right, because like I say, I was at both meetings.
you're okay with both?
I was okay with them, so I'll make a motion to accept the January 9th minutes and the January 23rd minutes as proposed. Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Ms. Boraz.
okay, we're gonna have to do that, we have to do it separate.
All right, so,
I have to do, prove it, I have one date, motion and second, and I have another date, which will have to be motioned and seconded.
so on the 9th, the motion was by myself to approve as written, and that was seconded by Ms. Boraz. And approved, and that was unanimous. And then, yes, that's the 23rd of January was the other set of minutes. That was also a motion by myself, seconded by Ms. Boraz, and unanimously approved. And one other agenda item, where we have 138 Kinsley Street in 2 weeks, and 33 East Pearl Street. Does anybody see any regional impact? Ms. Vitale is a no by a shake of the head. Ms. McKay is no, I'm a no, and Ms. Boraz,
Same, no.
no.
It's also the 2 cases that were postponed tonight.
If there's no other business before the board, I may not be here in 2 weeks myself. I might not make it back into town on the 27th, so not.
Officers, I guess we'll,
But I think we're just gonna wait till we have
Done that.
5 folks here to discuss and vote on officers for the following year. Because I'd hate to nominate and approve Ms. McKay as chair when she's not here.
Wait, what?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a second? Ms. Boraz, all in favor? So we are adjourned.
8:37.
Carter, please, thank you.
8:37.
Yes, thank you.
Bad for the driveway, but
Well,
Didn't
and we
do it,
push
didn't even
both
do
to
it.
turn on
That's
lights.
You got
a
it.